Leah.
Thanks, Anna. So this is a little bit of an awkward setup. So this is what we're going to do. We're making this up as we go. We're going to have the panelists stand behind there, and I'm just going to wander around so you never know where I am because we really only care what they say. I'm going to go ahead and you guys each, you have to share the mics, okay? So you have to get along. I was told I had to be nice. I can't ask any hard questions. I will do my best. So why don't you guys go ahead and introduce yourselves, and we'll start with Scott.
Great. Hi. This on? No. Hello? Okay, good. Hi, I'm Scott Anderberg. I'm the Vice President of University Partnerships at Pearson here in the UK, which means I am responsible for what is called our online program management business, a term that has become fairly well known across the industry. So our business that partners with universities to help enable the development and delivery of online programs. As Anna said, we've been working with King's Online now for a couple of years, but they're one of 5 university partners here in the UK. We have King's, University of Leeds, Manchester Metropolitan University, University of Sussex, and University of Northumbria. This is the 3rd time I've lived outside of the United States. You might catch that this is not my native accent, but the 2nd time I've lived in the UK. I was here in 2008 for about 3 years, then was in Sydney for 3.5 years working on our online program management business there, and then back here. Really felt, after having been here the first time, that there was still some unfinished business in the UK market, and that there's a real opportunity with what UK education has to offer globally, and seemed to be the right time and opportunity to come back and see what we could really do. So that's what brings me back.
Thanks, Scott. Andrea.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Hi, my name's Andrea Burrows. I'm Managing Director of OES. OES is headquartered in Australia, in Melbourne. We've got a number of partners there, and I started to set up the business in the UK in February of this year. My background's in digital transformation as well as higher education, and so this is a fantastically interesting space, and I'm looking forward to hopefully partnering with some universities in the near future.
Thanks, Andrea. Valerie.
So my name is Valerie. I look after the EMEA business at Coursera. For those of you, and I'm sure there's some very knowledgeable people here on the education sector in the room today, the first massive open online course. I look after a business that now encapsulates within EMEA around about 9 million learners, and we're adding around 250,000 unique LU learners a month.
I hope both. I'll put one down. Hi everybody, Mark Lester. I'm Managing Director for Universities and Educational Partnerships at FutureLearn. As Anna's already alluded to, we're partners with King's, we're partnered with many of the UK universities and others around the world, about 150. We've got about 8 million learners on our platform. And my particular role is to look after all the university relationships and think about how we support our universities partners across all lines of activity that they may have. So not just online degrees, which is one area which Ian Dunn at Coventry talked about this morning, but also CPD, working with public sector organisations around things like we're working with King's as well on a refugee project for Panellists, and other things that we do with corporates directly as well. So that's the business that I can talk about.
You're all actually well regarded in your space, and from Arizona State, we can't be where we are without partners. As President Crow says, we're polyamorous. We love everybody. We will partner with everybody because we're trying to serve everybody and trying to serve those unique student users. So not everyone believes in commercial partners, though. So can you tell us what the commercial partners offer the universities that they may not be able to build the capacity or have the expertise to do themselves initially? I'm going to go ladies first, so Andrea.
Oh, thank you. I think some of the key things are about speed to market, about being able to have a focus in terms of the online pedagogy, about being able to, I think, have best of breed, so being able to take the great qualities from the university, but actually enable those through what we can bring to the party. We're majority owned by Seek, which is a big careers employability platform, so that enables us to see data about who is looking to employ certain types of roles, what types of qualifications they'd need to do those roles, and then flow that back into curricula. So I think there's a number of different things that we can bring, but there's 2 or 3 of them there.
So similarly, I think, to the points that Andrea just brought up, I think very much that our focus is to use these partnerships and to leverage those to really drive the education agenda to a much broader audience. Coursera was founded in 2012, and that really was its mission, and it remains so to this day. Bring education to a much greater subset of individuals who don't have the ability to enjoy that level of education, perhaps from the backgrounds that they have. We're very mission driven to do that, and what we try and do is just accelerate that by providing a platform that provides those individuals a very easy means to get the best of education from our partners.
Well, with all this, it can depend on what area you're working in. But I would say, I echo everything that's been said. It's usually about some speciality or special skills that a third party can bring and the scale that they may bring. Some of it's about reaching to the market, expertise and knowledge around what a global market is looking for, which most of us find we struggle to understand. Capacity in terms of building courses or expertise in curriculum design online, which can be very different. The pastoral care that you need to do all of that very well. These are sort of the common things. But I think there is another thing I detect in our partnership, 2 extra things. One is, I think, a different perspective on things. When you're buried in universities, you have a certain point of view. I think having another person with different experience, more potentially commercial background, or the universities I talk to don't have a classic business development approach or function to understand how to go about transactions or deals for different customers. And I think the other one that we can bring, certainly the nature of what we do and what Coursera will do, is the network of partners. So actually the ability to learn more from a group of organisations rather than think that you're on your own. And I think that's another side which, as a brokerage, as a way to bring people together, we can do pretty well.
So the first thing I would say is to echo what Mark just said. I think one of the most valuable things a partner brings in almost any scenario is a new perspective. From my experience, most of the time that partners are looked for are in initiatives where there is an assumed lack of capability to get something done. And in most of those cases, there's an enormous amount of effort that it takes to get over the inertia of moving that initiative forward. And that usually takes a couple of things. One is a different perspective so that we get out of the echo chambers of our own organizations and start to work together towards something that breaks that deadlock and the momentum that's needed. The second is, I think, that ability to help drive change in an organization. So not just to get things started, but inevitably along the way, there are a lot of things about the established status quo within the organization. And my experience inside universities is that there are those things that sit both at the institutional level and at every faculty level. And that's very, very difficult to drive that kind of change into the organization. I think partners are really, really helpful in that regard. The last thing is, these are really difficult initiatives to undertake most of the time. They come with a lot of risk, and a partner helps to distribute that risk. And so I think those are really fundamental to healthy partnerships. The idea that you now are collaborating in an area of new perspective with people that are sharing risk, which drives together an alignment in terms of how the 2 organizations can work together.
Great. So Scott jumped ahead a little bit, but this is good. This is a good entryway. You guys talk a lot about what you as a company can bring to the universities, right? You have reach with your platforms, you have market expertise, you have collaboration in networks, and then you have certain levels of expertise that may not be embedded in truly what we believe is the center of academic, right? We hold knowledge at our core in the universities. So tell us what you look for in a great partnership and what makes it unique to work with each individual institution. Like, what does the institution bring to you?
Want to start?
I stumped them a little bit. This was not written down.
It's fine.
I don't think they understand the concept.
Yeah, I think they do.
So what makes a great partnership? In my experience, it's in a lot of cases, it all boils down to trust. I think, and what builds trust in the transparency, the openness, the willingness that you're going on a journey together. And you're doing that originally with aligned interests, but it's also that there is a genuine, sincere mission that you are trying to do, and it's hopefully broader than just the commercial goals. It can link to transformation, it can link to mission-driven goals around widening access. There's a range of things that it can be about, but it should be, when people are involved, and especially with academia, it should be about more than just money. And that's definitely our approach. So I think it's some of that, for me, that trust and that empathy and working together and transparency. And I think a bit of give and take on both sides. Now, what do I look for from a university partner? I think it depends. But if we're going for deeper engagements and relationships to try and go after different opportunities, I think a level of commitment, really that there is buy-in and support for this, that there is a willingness to go after something and do something new, that there's a flexibility in their approach and their thinking, there's an openness to how you might do something. And I think the other one is, I think that there's a follow-through. I think it links to the commitment, that they will go on a journey with you, and it's not I think there's a management of expectations for both sides, and that they go along with you, realising that actually things in the online space are evolving and things take time to get where they need to go. But ultimately you're going in the right direction together and can course correct. So that's the things I would look for in a university. It's a load of those intangibles that actually make the relationship strong or will break it ultimately.
Trust is a hard word, right? I use trust but verify. Go ahead, Valerie.
So I think Mark makes a very good point on trust. One of the things that we've certainly noticed is that it's an evolving space, that online learning hasn't necessarily settled, that there is a lot to be learned from understanding how people consume, how they learn using digital tools, how they can apply that, how they move on the Bloom's taxonomy, right? So how they move from simply understanding a concept to being able to apply it. And so one of the things that we really value in our university partners, similarly to what you were saying, is the ability to innovate, to take some of the feedback that we get from our learner community, and around about 82% of those will have a job. This isn't your university student par excellence, right? They will have other commitments, so understanding how they learn differently in different countries, different geographies, at what time they learn and what is most effective for them. And so helping our learners through partnership with universities is the most that we can gain. So their ability and openness to take those insights and then iterate with us to help better serve our learners.
I think for OES, the academic mission being the sort of the golden thread throughout everything is really important. So understanding that and making sure that we have a team of academics that can talk with the same language, the same currency, and really understand the challenges that the team on the university in academics have, and we can help translate that. I think being curious on both sides and just, understanding that we may not have all the answers, but perhaps we know the right questions to ask. And keeping a sense of humour, I think, probably, along with the trust. Yeah.
Great. Scott.
Yeah, I think the two things I would add is that we would look for sort of objectively an organization where there's a clear stated strategic commitment to growing through innovation, and that we recognize there's going to be that level of executive commitment, but then also a groundswell from the faculty levels where there's real interest in delivering something new and innovative. If there isn't that commitment from both sides of the organization at a university, it's really, really difficult to move things forward. The other thing I would say is a partner who is really committed to the development of relationships. And by that I mean real relationships in the operation of the partnership. I think we get really misaligned when we begin to think that we have a relationship with whatever the organizational name is, because you can't have a relationship with a university or with a company. You have relationships with individuals inside them, and if the ability to create those relationships isn't there, developing that trust that's required for getting anything over the line, and particularly for weathering those periods of time that inevitably will be there that are rocky, becomes almost impossible.
So you guys talked about a lot of things that may not come inherently to the universities. Like you talked about everyone wanting to move to online. Those of us who have been in the online space know that sometimes it takes a little bit of work to get someone to agree that online can be as effective as a traditional mode of learning. How do you help universities arm themselves to get more buy-in and to prove the point, use the data, or show examples? Scott, I'm going to pick on you. Nice try. You're going to hand it off.
Sure. So I think there's, from our perspective, one of the things that we're trying really hard to do in every operating region we have right now, so we have businesses in the US, in Australia, and North America, is doing a much better job of leveraging that real global scale to bring examples and information and data. That's particularly important in the UK market, where there is such an emphasis on international students as part of the cohort in online learning, which just isn't the case in the US and the Australian markets yet, and that's certainly not at scale. And so the opportunity to bring that experience of global operation back in and provide that is one of the things that we're trying to do, and we're trying to do a much better job of that. Pearson has been historically a fairly decentralized organization. It's coming together in a much tighter way for that kind of operation. I think the other thing is that it's important for us to spend a lot of time at the beginning of partnerships to really understand your institutions, so that it isn't us just bringing things from the outside, but so that we can actually speak the language of the institution much better. I think, again, this is about relationship development, so that we've got people at the right levels connecting with the right people to have those conversations that are really meaningful. I think you referenced data, and I think data is really important, but I think outside the context of the relationship that's established, it feels like you just have proof points being thrown at you, which usually aren't that important. So.
Great. Personalizing the data for the university and helping them. Great. Val.
So we talk a lot about skill transformation. So this is a really key tenet for Coursera and has been part of our strategy, certainly going forward from this year, to really start to measure for impact. So what does it mean for someone to take a Coursera course or a specialization or do a degree? What does it do to change their lives? So what is the impact? Now, we work with organizations as well as individuals. So when we work with organizations, we might look at things like digital transformation. How can we unpack that for a whole cohort of employees? And then for our individualized learners, we look at, what are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to get a new job? Are you suitable for this new job? Do you have the prerequisites? What would those look like? And really trying to fathom where are they on their journey. And then even now looking more and more to quantifying that impact, right? So did you manage to obtain a new position? Did that have any monetary ramifications? So that's what we're starting to plan out. And this is the sort of feedback we're starting to give to our university partners as well, the impact they make on the individuals' lives.
So FutureLearn was set up by 20 universities, mostly UK based, with the goal of learning together faster. That was the reason we all got together. And we've added more partners on, but tried to keep the same mission outside the UK. And what we've tried to do to help universities think about change is not think that we are the fountain of all knowledge and can just disseminate that. It's actually how we bring the universities together in multiple different levels to share best practice with each other. We're all learning together. FutureLearn isn't transforming universities. Universities are transforming themselves, but they need advice from each other, like we're doing here. We bring them together every sort of quarter or so for what we call our partner forums, where they will get together and universities will present back what they're doing, as well as us presenting what data we have, what learner stories we have to show that impact. But also, the biggest advocates the universities have is their own academics who are developing courses, who find that for the first time, when you do something online, you're forced to rethink some of the things that you've always done, because nobody really ever gave you feedback about how your courses are working, whether they're working, how effective it is. There's just an assumption over 20 years you've been doing it again and again, and your students seem to go through, and that's fine. But actually having that those thoughts and having that experience and then being able to share that with others and think how great it was. Some of you get those pioneers who want to do it, who then can inspire other people to do it. And then when you get the impact of those, that brings it even further forward and brings it to the attention of a wider community. And then you get people knocking on doors. And I think disseminating those good cases, disseminating what's possible and the transformative nature of the experience it can be, how much time it may free up for you as a personal academic, how much promotion it may have for you as an individual, gets more buy-in and gets more engagement in this kind of thing. But it isn't for everybody. And I think the other thing is there's a lot of expectation put on people, of academics who think it's my course, it's their course. Well, actually, in the future, these things take a team effort. It's how you work with others to produce these and how you build up an infrastructure and support for academics to be able to deliver a great experience in the future. So I think our job is an ongoing one of helping universities think, how do you create change? And it's as a partner in that effort. So I think, that's what we try to do, to instill that. And we work with Coventry, we've got secondees working to help them build their online degrees out and transfer our expertise, but equally bring some back so that we can bring that to other university partners. It's that kind of approach that I think is really important if universities are really going to get the value out of this in the long run.
Andrea, anything to add?
Yeah, a lot of really good points already made. I think it's about sharing experiences, and I think for the perhaps people that are not wedded to online, it's about getting them to not only tell them or show them, but actually to experience it. And some of our clients that perhaps weren't so keen on it have become the ones that are championing it. So I think we can get everybody on board and excited about it, even if it's perhaps not initially what they think is the right thing for them.
Right. Either be part of the solution or sit down and be quiet, right? So I'm going to ask one more question now, and then maybe I'll embed another one later, and then I want to open it up, so I'm preparing everyone else to get your questions ready for our group here. And that is, if you could find one example in higher education of strong partnership and innovation, what would you name? It doesn't have to be one of your partnerships. Of course, that might come easiest to mind. But just something that you've seen as innovative in the higher ed space globally. Doesn't have to necessarily be in any one market. Did I stump you?
Yeah, a little bit.
It was on the list of questions. I didn't deviate on that one. Maybe I asked it funny.
Well, one of the ones that I've come across recently that I really, really like is a partnership between the Ross Business School at the University of Michigan. And it is a small, and please forgive me, I cannot remember the name of the other company. It's a small accessories designer. They do things like briefcases, luggage, wristwatch bands, and things like this.
They're all Googling it for you.
Yeah,
right now.
exactly.
Yeah.
I couldn't find it just before the session because I was thinking of it ahead of time, and I couldn't come up with it. But it's a small company that they've formed a partnership with, that when the entrepreneurialism program at the Ross Business School wants to expand, when this business has a new line of product, it will actually hand it over to the entrepreneurial master's students to take that on and start that business line for them. It's a really, really interesting relationship because as a result, this small company gets some of the best, brightest, innovative thinkers moving in to take on things that would otherwise have a significant overhead in terms of new people that they'd bring in. And the business school students get real life experience in actually getting something off the ground, but in the context of an established sort of very small boutique business offering. And it's in its early stages, but it's been fairly successful so far. And I thought it was a really creative way to see corporate and higher ed come together with a really mutually beneficial operating model.
So you did stump me with this one, even though I should have maybe talked about the work with refugees, but I didn't want to take that away from our final speaker today. So one of the things that I think certainly has been very impactful, and it only launched for us 2 weeks ago, is we've been working very closely with the government of Colombia. And one of the things that we found was that the government of Colombia is trying to tackle the widespread, what they see as disinterest from their youth into attending a university, for trying to get them more engaged into education. So they've actually partnered with a university in Bogota and 2 other South American universities to deliver curriculum that is specifically meant to speak to young people. And they're advertising this via the Coursera platform. They actually supply credits to these individuals so that they can consume this. So I think that for me, and the way that that transforms these individuals' lives, is something that I find very promising. As I mentioned, it's a new project, so it would be interesting to see the uptake, but certainly I think that's quite special.
I won't talk about the project because, again, with King's and because that's coming later with Hannah. But I think the question that we got in advance was something we haven't worked with. It's not in our own partnership or
Well, if
anything
you want
else.
to branch out or something you're particularly
So
proud of.
no, it's fine. It's okay. I'll stick to the original. So I think the one thing that caught my eye not that long ago was Northeastern University's tie-up with IBM. And I thought that was quite a nice coming together of a big company and the universities recognising, I think it was a project management course and there was another data course, where if you're successful in the internal company program, they would recognise those for credit towards a master's qualification that then Northeastern would use. And I think that kind of seamless transition and recognition of being something you do in your company that can then be taken into the university's recognition of prior learning, I think is a good model. I'd expect to see more of that kind of interaction in the future, where the companies can much better articulate what they need, and that sort of starts to get trained either by themselves and reflected in a qualification as prior learning, or something that would actually universities can start much more seamlessly working together with them to create qualifications that address the problems that they face.
I'm going to slightly duck this question because I think actually what I've heard today about your partnerships with King's have been really, really impressive. And I think definitely what's interesting about this space is that I think people are still working through how we can do this different and better. And so for that reason, I think the best is yet to come. The fact that OES has made an investment in terms of coming into the UK market, I think is a strong indicator that this is a growing sector. Of course, my colleagues on the stage have been in the UK a little longer, but I think probably all of them would say this space is right for doing something very, very exciting and building on the great work, certainly, that I've heard about today.
And definitely all over the world, people look to the UK for high quality higher education. So the more you build it to where they can tap into it, I know by experience in the Middle East, they watch for what you guys are doing here in the UK. So I'm going to open it up to the audience to ask any questions. Does anyone have any? I'm going to run the mic to you if you do. Or actually, can you press your little talk button? I learned that today. No questions. Oh, go ahead.
What I'd like to ask is, are there any exciting innovations that you have, perhaps on the back burner that you've yet to had the chance to implement with an existing partner or with a future partner?
He's basically saying, what can we do to partner? Yeah? Okay, we'll give them a minute on that one.
I think sort of innovation comes out of that. What's the thing that makes that particular higher education institute special? And so we don't, whilst there might be sort of a lab of lots of different ideas going on, I think what sparks that sort of idea is when you work together with a partner and you see something that you can make happen. And so I think there's lots of things bubbling away, but I think the really great ones are when you work in collaboration and you make something that's relevant and real for that particular program.
I think I would just say that, going back to a previous point, it's actually qualifications or individual pathways, as we call them, micro-credential pathways, which can be done collaboratively between two universities or more. And I think that's things that we're working on and are actively being worked on at the moment by partners in our network. So I think that's an area of innovation that we could probably talk about.
I think there's probably a range of things for us as we look across the spectrum of assets that Pearson can bring to the relationship. There are the standard services that sit in the OPM sector, market research, marketing, recruitment, student support. And there's a lot of things about the student experience that extend along through there that aren't necessarily core to those. So for instance, we're looking for ways to take our English language assets and weave those into the early process with students, so that you have an opportunity to increase the size of the market who is qualified to take programs who might not otherwise be able to do so. And there's a range of innovative things we can do there. In fact, we're just working with King's right now on a pre-sessional English course, and we're looking wherever we can across our partnerships to bring more of those assets to the student experience. We're looking for ways to take what we're doing in augmented and virtual reality and make those available in the learning experience itself, so that you can make certain aspects of content or laboratory elements more engaging. And now with the kind of cheap devices that can be distributed via Google or things like that, there's a lot of things that are really, really possible that wouldn't have been even 2 or 3 years ago. And so that's moving forward. And then there's, I think as you look at the international market in particular, there's a significant challenge in combining what you've already pointed out, which is a huge demand for UK higher education, and an ability and a willingness to pay at UK higher education fees. And so finding ways to reduce the barrier to entry to students and develop relationships that allow you then to move them forward on a learning journey that's really personalized for them at whatever level that might be. And Mark and Valerie have already talked about credentialing at the CPD level and then potentially matriculating students through. We think there's some really interesting models there, as well as looking at ways to do low-cost, high-volume delivery. And so those are a range of things across partnerships that we're looking at and beginning to experiment with that hopefully become much more visible within the space within the next 18 months or so.
So I think similarly to what has just been said, one of the big tenets for Coursera certainly is to open up from micro-credentials to fully accredited degrees. So we've partnered with the likes of the University of London, as well as a number of other partners, to be able to facilitate a physical way of interacting with a university that will then be fully accredited, and that will allow you to do that in a sort of pace that obviously opens it up to those people who are currently doing degrees. As part of this, we are offering scholarships, so we're trying to reduce further the barrier of entry, but then to still enable the degree program for our learners.
You had a question?
Yeah, it's kind of following on from that last point. To what extent in 5 or 10 years' time do you think that you will move to become commissioners rather than kind of partnerships? Because I guess what the universities offer more and more is the knowledge generation. And I could imagine a scenario where to do a particular degree, you may be commissioning modules in one aspect from Warwick, another aspect from King's, and so that will change quite markedly the university role in those kind of partnerships. I just wonder where you thought it would be in 10 years' time as opposed to now.
I definitely think that it's a very good point, that more and more there will be a call for collaborating between universities to deliver full programs. We definitely see that today. One of the things that we also do is to give you the feedback from the market, right? So what are our learners really looking to gauge? And then we actually go out to the universities for you to start to develop those courses. So it's sort of a push and pull mechanism for us, and I just see that growing. Certainly, we put online about 80 courses a month. Of those, about 30% are market-led.
I don't think it's nearly as far off as 5 or 10 years. I think there's examples in place already where there's institutions are actively engaged in that, and the Plus Alliance is probably the most relevant of today, where there's already work trying to see how can you commission those things into shared programs. I think the MOOC providers are a great example of where student demand has very naturally brought those together, and under the banner of a single aggregator, they are choosing themselves what that kind of aggregation looks like. But my experience would say that's less dependent on us as commercial partners than it is on the interest and will of the university to operate in that way together. I mean, I think we'd be quite happy if our 65 partners globally wanted to all put their courses, their modules into a big pot and allow us to mix and match on the basis of student demand, I think we could find some really interesting things to do with that. But the impediment there is typically at the institutional level. And so I think the question for us is, what can we do to begin to break down the barriers and help facilitate that kind of interaction in a way that makes something much more valuable to the student as a result of having all of those shared assets available with one potential partner or two potential partners that can really help accelerate that activity.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's for us ultimately the brand that's out there is your brand. It's not our brand, OES's brand. So, and it's your vision about what you want your higher education institute to do, to achieve. We can enable that. We can support that. We can be a critical friend. But I think ultimately that's your vision that we will support and partner with you to deliver.
My crystal ball is pretty murky at the moment. There's nothing clear about what's going to happen. We all think in the future it's going to change dramatically, and change can be very unpredictable. I think we've seen commissioning happen. Coursera commissioned specializations very early on. There is a role for commissioning to the extent that you want a platform wants to survive and make sure it's got a good spread of course options for its students. But whether there's going to be a wholesale shift to platforms that sort of and that you become suppliers to, I find that difficult to think of that as the future. I think it's going to be much more complicated than that. Well, I'm much more interested in what employers are going to do, and I think for me there are skills gaps, there are continuing skills gaps. Things are changing very fast for business, and there's a lot of people coming in looking to get work, and the traditional routes aren't available. And I think how the sector responds to business and to the demographic profile that Gideon talked about earlier is the challenge we all face, and how that pans out is pretty unpredictable. All we do know, the direction is online has to be a part of it. Universities probably need to work in collaboration with each other, not just with for-profit providers, that you need to learn and take on more of the skills yourselves, and that the future provider I don't think exists yet. I mean, that's been the history of most transformation. The people, the early starters are never the models that exist afterwards. So, and we've already heard Amazon and others are all thinking about it. So I don't know what will happen, but I do know that what is happening now isn't the future. That's all.
Well, I want to say thank you to our panel. You definitely brought to light how important it is for collaboration in your partnerships and reaching new learners and using the innovation, and especially the fact that it doesn't take just one partner to make things happen. It takes many partners, and the continued trust that you have to build amongst yourselves to see good things happen. The minute you start treating each other like vendors and suppliers, it usually breaks down. So I appreciate your candid answers and everything. We are out of time, so I'm going to hand it over to Anna for the next one, but a big round of applause to our panelists. And I want a selfie real quick.